The live broadcast is?
Yes, it's audio and
slides.
screen sharing, exactly.
Gotcha.
You don't have to smile into the camera and smile. Okay, then much success.
Thank you. What's that? No, no. No.
I picked that up from my
I think that was the last session. There's no one in the booth right now, so it was an expensive add-on.
feeling like Canada.
Do you have little cards as well? So I was thinking about maybe handing out the cards and then sending people to the stand, to the booth for those, because does that make sense? Okay. I need one though.
It's quite warm in here.
I'm gonna go grab the water.
It shows 3. I beat myself. Good deal.
So you're gonna be here in case you need something, okay? Work
I just minimized it there. Is that okay? Drew Black. DRE. CFA is the primary organization. Thank you. Yes. Certainly help.
Yeah. My blood pressure is already high enough. Trump was elected president. I don't know.
That is ridiculous.
It can't be.
I admit I laughed out loud when I. This can't. My God.
So Hillary won the popular vote. It looks like.
Yeah, that's the breakdown I haven't seen yet.
I haven't seen all the numbers, but it's.
I was gonna look that up.
Yeah.
I should work on that one. You'll have to speak up.
Yep.
So we'll just get started in another 2 or 3 minutes as I see people are still kind of coming in. Good to have you up here. Like ready to get going? Provide some introductions here. Excellent. So I think we're probably ready to get going. I think we're live here on the broadcast. So I'll just take a couple minutes to introduce myself as well as the panel here. Really quite pleased to be able to present you with a panel representing farmers' interests and from farmers themselves, in some cases from around the world. My name is Drew Black. I'm with the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. I'm Director of Environment and Science Policy with CFA. And we collaborated with a number of organizations to be able to bring you this panel here today. The subject of which is on-farm renewables and sustainable intensification to address climate change and food security. So we're tackling both the gains that can come with sustainable intensification and being able to improve productivity for farmers, mitigate against climate change and help to support adaptation and build resilience. And specifically through the lens of looking at some of the on-farm renewables. So that's bringing renewable energy onto farm, and that could be a wind, hydro, solar, and others, as well as on-farm produced renewable energy. I'm just going to take a quick moment here as well to introduce another new report that's coming out of the World Farmers Organization. It's called Farmers Implementing the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. So following this side event, it's going to be available at the event space that WFO has just outside here on my right. And then we've got a number of small cards just to help promote that. Really nice case studies from across the world of how farmers have really taken on the initiative to reduce emissions and bring on-farm renewables to their operations, and to help showcase that as some real beneficial plans that can be adopted by others. So I'd like to introduce the panel at this time. To my immediate left here is Mr. Don McCabe, who is on the board of directors for the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. He is the president of the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, which is one of the largest provinces in Canada and has been since 2014. Was the vice president from 2008 to 2014 and is currently the vice chair of the Bioindustrial Innovation Center and is a no-till corn, soybean, and wheat farmer. He has a doctorate level education in soil genesis and classification, as well as a chemistry degree. We're going to go through, and each panelist will have 10 minutes to present, and then following that, we're hoping to have some nice time, close to half an hour for questions in audience. Next will be Olivier Dauger, who is a farmer of wheat and beets, current president of the Union of Agriculture Unions of the ESNE, representing the Regional Federation of Agricultural Unions Farms, North Paris Basin in France, and is the Environmental Commission member to the National Federation of Farmers Unions and on the board of the Farmers Union in France. He's currently in charge of climate and energy issues. Following that, we'll hear a presentation from Simon Hall with the National Wildlife Federation on focusing in on the sustainable intensification of agriculture with a focus on livestock. He is a manager of the Tropical Forest and Agriculture Product, and he leads NWF's work on cattle and soy in Latin America. He's currently the liaison to the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, as well as the Brazilian Roundtable on Sustainable Livestock. Following that, we'll hear from Dr. Kirit Shalat with the National Council of Climate Change, Sustainable Development, and Public Leadership, speaking about the food security, water, and energy nexus. He holds a PhD in public administration and began his career in public administration, joining the Greater Gujarat Administrative Service in 1967, where he's just most recently retired as the Indian Administrative Service as Principal Secretary of the Gujarat Agriculture and Cooperation Department. He's worked at both a grassroots level and has had his hand in the formulation of and implementation of policies on agriculture, rural, and industrial development. Following that, we'll hear from Dr. Rohit Srivastava, who will be speaking about weather forecasting for climate resilient agriculture, so putting the tools into the hands of farmers to help boost adaptation and resiliency. He is an agricultural extension specialist and former advisor with the Planning Commission, again, of the government of Gujarat. Following that, we will have a question and answer period with just a couple 5-minute wrap-up session from Dr. Sadamante, who is the former advisor agriculture with the Planning Commission, Government of India. And he'll provide just a couple closing remarks as in reflection upon both the presentations of the panel as well as the discussion we've had after. So thank you very much for your attendance and listening to me. I will turn it over to those that are actually the experts in this field. Please, Mr. Don.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Don McCabe, and I would like to present some principles, I guess, today, and step through what I see as the job of today's farmer. And I'd like to lay you out the following principles right at the front end. Number one, we have one planet, we have one landscape. That one landscape has to do a whole bunch of things. It houses people, very inefficiently, I might add. It houses animals. It has to deal with water. It has to deal with everything. It's the issue of how do we manage that to our extent that's possible. And from that same token, the issue of now replacing energy that has come from the ground in the form of oil in the past with the new, I will say this about wind and solar. Choose your sites very carefully. You should never take good arable land out of production unless you have to accommodate solar especially. And with that, I'd like to make sure that we snake through this as quickly as possible. So we're here to United Nations events. So I think it's important to use the definition of sustainability according to the United Nations. And that's the issue that I get to farm today because my father and my grandfather did an excellent job before me. And now it's my job to make sure it's going to get turned over for generations to come in even better shape. But all the other stressors that are in all these little boxes that are around this are issues that we need to be aware of as we move forward. And it's why, as farmers, when it comes to discussions like these, we know words are valuable, but they should also not be hang-ups. And we're getting to that point. So I would offer insight from a North American perspective of what saved mankind. And you could pick any crop you want to put in here. The point I'm trying to make is genetic improvement is absolutely necessary for the goals that we have to meet moving forward. And I also wish to highlight from this slide that when it comes to a farmer's job is based on the latitude that they work in. Therefore, there are certain latitude bands around this earth right now that are going to be much more able to provide energy after doing other services than there are in other regions. And the issue then is to build on these things with the implementation of proper genetics. And as you can see here, right back from 1850 and through to the Depression, we didn't have good corn yields, and we've been investing in technology ever since. It's moved us forward. But here's the real question for what our negotiators here need to solve. This is the true environmental concern. Organic matter is missing. So now how do we put that organic matter back in? I would offer very cleanly, very quickly, farmers just need to be given a direction. Because here is the issue of what sustainability looks like on my farm. And I would offer that you've got a field there where there was 2008 soybeans. You can see the winter wheat that was there in November of 2008 that would be harvested in 2009. But in the picture on the right, you'll see corn cobs lying on top of the ground. That tells me very clearly that evidently those corn cobs are not needed by organisms that are there. They would have already had them for lunch. They've been gone. But all the rest of the stalks and everything else is gone. So the reality is, if you look at that photo really, really closely, you'd be able to pick up some earthworm middens. And that's the issue of me being a no-tiller and what I do and how I do it. So I offer to you the following, that therefore a farmer, no matter where they are on this globe, is actually a manager of carbon and nitrogen and phosphorus cycles with the interception of the water cycle to produce starch, oil, fuel, fiber, energy, and protein, while providing animal habitat, improving air quality, improving soil quality, improving water quality. I just want to get paid for something. And that's the bottom line here, because I'm not interested in getting into a debate about your agriculture is better than my agriculture. Farmers will make their agriculture work with what they need with the techniques and tools they have, and the brands will differentiate themselves. Because in general, please do not take the numbers off the slide literally. I want you to be focused on the concept of all this CO2 that we're here to address, or the methane, or the nitrous oxide, or the other global warming potentials. Bottom line, they're all up there floating. But when it comes to farmers, if you take a look on the far right, I just clicked in on the issue that as farmers, we buy at retail, we sell at wholesale, we pay the truck in both ways. That means that if there's going to be a cost increase on something, we got to figure out how to eat it while still holding on to a profit margin. That's why agriculture has to be embraced in these talks and why things need to move ahead, because part of what I'm reducing right now, I need recognition for. And it's the issue of nobody's going to pollute their land. People are going to make sure their water's in better shape than it was. The issue for this particular grouping, who else is going to put carbon back into the ground except for farmers and foresters? We're the ones that know how to manage that landscape to put that carbon back in. Recognition is necessary. And once that is done, with today's technologies and today's yields and today's opportunities, this is where we can now explore into the whole arena of moving through from composites through to energy. And I'm jumping ahead on my own slides, but this is the dynamic. This is what farmers and foresters can do. Today we're here to talk about farmers, and that's a good thing because bottom line, we make stuff that you like to eat. Foresters, you can pick your teeth. At the end of the day here, capturing environmental advantage, that's what the reality is here of harnessing the sun's rays through photosynthesis. And plants therefore know how to make sugars and move it along. And this becomes the plant material that we're harvesting, or the materials that are left on top of the ground. I would offer that a fellow by the name of Dr. Ratan Lal out of the Columbus, Ohio, at Ohio State University has made it very clear. The stuff that's on top of the ground is going to go back into the air predominantly. In other words, only 2 to 20% of all that residue that's on top of that ground may ever go into the ground for soil organic matter. It's the roots and the stuff that's below ground that's going to build your soil organic matter. So it's the issue of making sure you've got enough carbon going back into that system, not only to maintain, but continue to enhance your soils to build the resilience that's necessary for those soils. So as a farmer, what are my jobs? Well, number one, I feed people. It's done every day of the week. We're now getting into all this wonderful stuff. I've got to have a value chain. I can tell you straight up, as a farmer, I've never seen a value chain yet that didn't have a frickin' broken link in it right next to me because nobody's talking. This is still a profit-taking game, and it's going to have to improve if we're going to make it work. The reality is we know how to move stuff. Markets are making that happen. The next issue is I need to feed my soil. If I do not feed that soil and keep that engine alive of all those little bugs and critters that are in there that are actually moving that organic matter and enhancing the interaction with those plant roots, my crop is not going to be there. But now again, we need to come back to what is the most important piece here, and it's the soil. There's a fellow by the name of Jenny come up with a soil forming equation. Bottom line, the 5 things that are in it: parent material and climate and topography and organisms and time. Well, those first 3 of climate, topography, and parent material, when I bought the farm, I bought those 3. I can't move the farm. The last 2, organisms and time. Organisms is my crop rotation, and what do I do with it to move things along and make sure that I take care of all my critters. The last thing I've got then on my side is time, and that means make sure you hang on to the farm, pay the bills, be a good manager, do your job. But this is the absolute cusp of what we as farmers need to do. And from this then, we can move into other arenas now of a complete bioeconomy or another aspect of the economy, because remember, we fed everybody. So I do not believe for one iota, except for the possibility of a very distorted philosophy class, that we should be having arguments about food versus fuel. It's absolutely absurd in my mind. Because at the end of the day, I'm now doing residue management that allow me to continue on with practices, because no matter what the plant is, doesn't matter if it's my corn back in Ontario, or whether it's a cactus plant, or whether it's a palm tree out there, everything's made up of the same stuff. Cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin. In other words, sugar and hard stuff. The reality of today's technology, we now know how to get at that sugar. This is why there is no food versus fuel debate. You can't tell that sugar apart from any other sugar once it's extracted. So moving forward, I can integrate into a complete value chain of activity and replace things on a fossil fueled basis. And I come from southern Ontario. There's a place there called Sarnia where there's a bunch of oil refineries. You will also have oil refineries back in your own region you know of. Well, this is the substitution issue. And I can start to put all these other opportunities into these boxes and replace products up and down that chain from the perspective of moving me through then as a farmer. I'm into a new market. What do I want to do? I want to maximize value. I'm going to start off with then the whole issue of composites are worth more than chemicals. Chemicals are worth more than fuels. And fuels are things like ethanol, butanol, airplane fuel. I don't care. Now go to natural gas replacement or methane. And finally, the last thing I actually ever want to do is make an electron. Once I've made an electron, I got to start all over again and go back to the issue of the sun. And at the same token, if I'm exporting this to some other country, should I have been capturing value in my own region for my own farmers? Why am I exporting? All this needs to be close. Every presentation requires one slide that absolutely nobody can read. This is mine. Bottom line, start on the left where the big words are and go to the far right. That's all that matters, because on the far left, you've got sugar, you got that hard stuff called lignin and a few other pieces. In between, you got everything literally in the kitchen sink, the garage, and all other places in between. Because on the far side, you've just met every obligation that mankind has. We can do it all because we know what we're doing. So in perspective, I wish to pull this together from a policy perspective of, we in Canadian agriculture, we're roughly 10% within our own country. You give me the right rules, I'll bring you 20% solutions. And I can do it through direct reductions that can easily be measured. And I can also do it back to that sinks thing. And this is something the world needs to be harnessing, because we're the ones that can put it back in. There was a program mentioned last year in Paris about the 4 increasing organic matter there. This is where this fits. Because at the end of the day, I really, really, really get wonderfully tired of all the wonderful words we need to improve and build upon that end in HION or LYSIS or whatever else you need. Because at the end of the day, this is ridiculous that I am able to give you sequestration. I will be reducing because that's in my best interest and my bottom line of my business. I will be bringing you new products that will complement what you had before. And oh yes, don't forget adaptation, because we got to argue about that for a while too. Folks, let's get over it. Mitigation, adaptation, they're all ATION words. When I put a draw bolt into a no-till drill, hook it to a tractor, I guarantee you that draw bolt does not know if it's mitigating or adapting, but it damn well knows it's under stress. And the reality is we're going to be under greater stress if we don't move on and build what farmers and foresters can do for you, because there's only one carbon atom on that periodic table. And the farmers of the world know how to manage that along with our foresters' friends. So let's get at it. We know how to put all these pieces together. We're not out to starve anybody, because you all got here today and you're all going to be well fed tomorrow and the day after. Remember, you got 40% food waste you need to deal with before you complain to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don. And now we'll turn to Olivier with the French Farmers Association.
Good afternoon. FNSEA units around an innovative, civic, and sustainable agriculture farmers who perform to 3 functions of their profession. Production function, the first one, provide consumers with healthy and quality products. Promotion of renewables and development of low carbon economy, energy transition. Territorial function, manage space, shape, preserve landscape and natural resources. And social function, to contribute to employment and animation of rural areas. Our organization is based on a triple representation. Our 320,000 members are found by all territories, all sectors, all types of farmers and farming system. Among others, I am president of the local agricultural chambers in the north of France, and I am in charge of climate and energy issues at national level of FNSEA. But first of all, I am a farmer. I produce crops, wheat, beets, whey protein, pea, alfalfa, malting barley, and I cultivate 218 hectares, and I have a joint venture with a neighbor. I am running national agricultural system to optimize the use of input. Moreover, I sell my production through cooperative. French farmers and foresters have been very active on the climate issue for many years. Agriculture and forestry are directly and badly affected by climate change, drought, flooding, change in crop calendars. For farmers, climate change is not a theoretical concept. It is part of their daily lives. Agriculture, in order to guarantee food security and meet the challenge of energy transition, must always innovate and must always look for solutions that tomorrow will allow it to maintain and sustainably develop its activities in the service of the people. Agriculture and forestry play their part in tackling climate change, and they have a major role to play through their unique ability to store carbon in biomass and soils. French farmers, for example, have done a lot. In France, Emissions from agriculture have decreased by 12% over the past 22 years. Even though production has increased significantly during this period. Better genetics, animal nutrition, recovery of organic fertilizer and co-products, the optimization of nitrogen inputs, the use of decision support tools, the reintroduction of hedgerows and agroforestry, wood mobilization, and other changes in agricultural practice are all improvements while maintaining the potential for agricultural production. At FNCA, we truly believe that efficiency, which is the ratio between results obtained and resources used, is essential today in farming activity, especially with the demographic challenge we have to face. Less land, less water, limited natural resources command us to be efficient for each unit produced. Increasingly, we see green energy as an integral part of the future of French and global agricultural sector, and French farmers have invested in green energy. They have seen the benefits to their business, to the French economy, and to society and the environment. Our data suggests around 20% of green energy is produced by farmers. When agricultural and forest biomass is counted together, this accounts for 2/3 of the green energy in France and over 40% of the effort to reach the target for 2020. The range of green energy technologies are of interest to farmers. In France, the development of farm biogas units enables the sale of electricity and heat. Biogas can inject into the natural gas network and biomethane produced as a fuel. Biogas is a true example of the circular economic in action. In France, we promote agricultural biogas using livestock manure and few crops. At the end of the process, we produce renewable energy and organic fertilizer for farmers who don't need to buy fossil fertilizer anymore. Agricultural biogas, therefore, provide multiple environmental benefits. French biofuel industry have invested massively €2 billion in new high-performance production plants. In addition, photovoltaic on the roofs of the farm building play an important role in the development of renewable energy. The production of food and feed remains a priority, but bioenergy represents a new market opportunity and a way of diversifying risk and income for farmers. Beyond that, bioenergy is a good instrument for climate mitigation. Farmers producing sustainable bioenergy help decrease greenhouse gas emissions across the heat, power, energy, and transport sectors, and at the same time promote rural development. In France, the FNCA and forest organizations are working with national authorities to develop a national biomass strategy and a national bioeconomy strategy. Also, the level of incentives available for low-carbon energy is different. Member states across Europe have been decreasing. Agricultural renewable remains a solid investment as the costs come down and the maturing industry becomes more self-sufficient. However, public support is still needed for non-mature sector like biogas, for instance. Research, development, and major investments are still needed. To finish, let me say that as a French farmer, it was an honor to be present when the historic Paris Agreement was signed to tackle both the causes and effects of climate change. This is vital to make our food supply more resilient and more efficient. And we think that agriculture can play its part as one of the solutions to reduce the world's dependence on fossil fuels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olivier. Now we'll turn to Simon.
Great, thanks so much. It's a real honor to present here in Marrakesh at the COP, and I feel even more privileged to present alongside such a distinguished panel of experts here. My presentation is going to focus on the benefits of sustainable intensification of the cattle sector, with particular insights from Brazil. I'll be highlighting potential synergies that can be generated when advancements in productivity gains are coupled with effectively implemented zero deforestation policies. I think it'll be important to more specifically parameterize what I mean by sustainable intensification, which at the National Wildlife Federation, we often characterize as moderate intensification. And I'll get to that a bit later in my presentation, but just to premise this and start off by saying that we're not talking about advocating for the rampant proliferation of CAFOs across the landscape, just so that we're clear, we can avoid any confusion. But before we jump into things, I think it would just be helpful, just to say a few brief words about the National Wildlife Federation and our work. NWF was founded in 1936 and is one of the oldest and largest wildlife conservation and education organizations in the U.S. with nearly 6 million members and supporters across 50 state and territorial affiliates. In terms of our international work, which I help lead, our main goal is to eliminate tropical deforestation from agriculture supply chains. This work is focused around a key set of commodities, including cattle, soy, palm oil, pulp and paper, and biomaterials more broadly. My specific area of focus is around cattle and soy in South America, where we are trying to accelerate the development and implementation of zero deforestation commitments and working to catalyze incentives at various levels in the value chain to spur greater adoption of sustainable or moderate intensification practices. So before we get into some of those specifics around intensification, I thought it'd be helpful just to provide a bit of context and some background. The Brazilian cattle herd currently totals over 210 million head, excuse me. About 60 million reside within the Amazon biome. And just looking at beef for a moment here, there's around an 80-20 split, just roughly speaking, with the majority of production in Brazil being consumed in domestic markets. But despite sort of this consuming over 80% of total production, Brazil ranks as one of the global leading exports in terms of beef. There's 3 main export destinations that make up over 50%, almost about 55% of total trade. And for these purposes, I've just sort of aggregated China and Hong Kong together. But if you were to disaggregate that and split them up, Hong Kong would rank first. I thought it would also be helpful to examine the spatial distribution of cattle, the cattle herd and the stocking density. So let's see if this laser pointer works. Looking at the map on the left here, we can see the darker areas represent municipalities with more cattle. So we see a lot of animals in absolute terms distributed across this sort of area right here through the state of Pará, Mato Grosso, a little bit in Rondônia, and even in Mato Grosso do Sul here. So right in here, sort of this right on the eastern edge of the Amazon biome, where it sort of meets with the Cerrado biome. If we take a step over to the map on the right here, where we have stocking density, darker regions indicate greater concentration of cattle on a per hectare basis. This is really important because it shows the extensive nature of the sector in these areas. And generally speaking, in sort of the eastern region of the Brazilian Amazon, stocking rates tend to range relatively low, speaking about 0.5 to 1 head per hectare. Now, obviously, this is just an average estimate, and there's a lot of variability across the landscape here. But as you can see from this map and the key here, that generally holds true. So as I mentioned, NWF's work is focused around eliminating deforestation from commodity supply chains. And as many of you here may already know, the expansion of cattle ranching is the leading driver of deforestation in the world, exceeding other forest risk commodities such as palm oil and soy. Just in the past 15 years, over 21 million hectares of forests have been cleared in the Brazilian Amazon alone. And up to 80% of this forest loss has been driven by the expansion of cattle ranching in this region. So it's important to point out here that Brazil has successfully reduced deforestation in recent years from historic highs around the mid-2000s. And this is really important to recognize. But it's also important to recognize some of the recent trends. So just from the last year, 2014 to 2015, we saw an increase in deforestation of 24%, which was just recently updated from the Brazilian Space Institute. And this is really significant for obviously for many, many different reasons. But one way we can understand this is in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Research indicates that cattle reared on recently deforested land in the Brazilian Amazon, the region that I'm speaking on, has a greenhouse gas footprint that's up to 25 times higher than that of established pasture. So perhaps this is my slide that nobody can read, but so the implications of continued large-scale deforestation are really quite staggering, and I could spend a lot of time going on and on about the impacts of wildlife, biodiversity, ecosystem services, so on, so on. But given that today is Farmers' Day, I thought it'd be interesting to focus on what are the impacts for ranchers, mainly from a productivity standpoint. So as we can see from this figure, as deforestation increases across the landscape, you see various impacts associated with reduced precipitation levels, increased mean surface temperature, reductions in the evapotranspiration, relative humidity, and so on and so forth down this side. So as these are going on, we have sort of these feedbacks. And I know that may have been a bit hard to read all those numbers and quickly because I know I'm limited for time, but basically it boils down to several large categories of impacts: longer dry seasons, reduced rainfall, and increased temperatures. Basically, there's been estimates of what the climate feedbacks associated with increased deforestation across the landscape would result in terms of productivity losses, and about 33%, about a third for pastures, which is really quite significant. And this can have really serious ramifications in terms of food security. Scenarios like this could potentially contribute to commodity shortages, supply shocks, price instability in the market. And given Brazil's position in terms of global trade of cattle exports and other agricultural goods, this could really send negative ripple effects throughout the world. So while those doom and gloom scenarios are important to recognize and to be aware of, I think it's more interesting to spend time on the real pragmatic question here, which is how do we shift this paradigm and advance sustainable intensification as a way to help avoid some of these worst case scenarios? And this is really at a fundamental level, trying to understand what the benefits are of sustainable intensification, both from a productivity and profitability standpoint for producers. But first, I think it's important that I just spend a couple moments to just provide some clarity about what I mean by sustainable intensification. So for NWF, as I mentioned, we often characterize this as modern intensification to signal that we're not sort of advocating for this complete restructuring of the production system itself. As I mentioned, we're not trying to transform all ranches in the Amazon into CAFOs. This is somewhat ridiculous, but it's important to make this clear so we avoid misunderstanding at this level. What we're really advocating for is mostly low-tech sort of approaches, such as rotational grazing, the better use of paddocks, improved fencing, better grass mixtures, improved herd and pasture management, the use of technical extension-like services, retaining some established pastures for shade, using pumps and other types of water management systems to reduce erosion near riparian areas. These are the types of things that we're talking about here. And from our perspective, these are the types of practices that embody sustainable or moderate intensification of the cattle sector in the Brazilian Amazon. This is sort of how we can apply these practices to advance that agenda. So implemented effectively, being sensitive, obviously, to regional heterogeneity of the landscape, these practices could result in increased productivity and profitability and reduce greenhouse gases on a per unit basis, as well as lead to economic multiplier effects. Aggregated together, this can really contribute to improved livelihoods for producers and rural communities. So that's all really great, and but those efforts can't exist in isolation, and I think that that's a really important point for this presentation. If the focus is just on that, for this region particularly, we won't really produce meaningful benefits for forests or wildlife. So as we've already seen already, I had a few slides on this. Continued deforestation will produce negative feedback, so will really undermine these efforts at the core. Therefore, I think it's really critical, and the focus of this presentation is to sort of encourage that this coupling of sustainable intensification practices with effective implementation of zero deforestation commitments, which are sort of being spurred from the private sector as well as some public sector initiatives as well. And this is mainly focused on the downstream actors in the value chain. So when these efforts are linked together and we have this effective coupling, I think that there's a real opportunity to produce great synergies, including land sparing benefits, additional emissions reductions from the land use sector, as well as protecting biodiversity and promoting the conservation of wildlife habitat. There are also, through this coupling, I think it's also important to highlight just some of the economic benefits for producers and other actors in the value chain, including increased access to markets, preferential purchasing agreements. But probably most importantly of all of the benefits is really this coordinated approach can produce reduced leakage and rebound effects, which have really sort of previously marginalized a lot of the impacts and effectiveness of these approaches sort of in isolation or in a vacuum from one another. So there's many great examples of this currently underway in Brazil to advance sustainable intensification. There's the sort of the National Low Carbon Agriculture Plan, or ABC. This has prioritized recovery of degraded pastures, integrated crop livestock systems, among many other things. There's also the BPA, or Boas Práticas, the good agricultural practices, which were developed by the Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation, which is a branch of the Brazilian Ministry of Environment. Basically providing ranchers with a set of tools and guidance on how to implement these types of practices. There's also a lot of multi-stakeholder initiatives like the Brazilian Roundtable on Sustainable Livestock and other NGO-led projects, which I didn't have space or time to include all of them, obviously. Just to highlight a few that are sort of, from our perspective, really trying to embrace this sort of coupled approach are two projects, both in the Amazon. This is the ICV Novo Campo project, and the Nature Conservancy is leading one in the state of Pará, in the municipality of São Félix do Xingu, which is a real sort of powerhouse in terms of cattle production. I just want to throw this slide up here to illustrate that it can be possible to decouple deforestation from cattle production. So the green bars here represent deforestation from PRODIS, or INPE, the Brazilian Space Research Institute. And the blue lines represent, the blue line represents the cattle herd. So as you can see, right around this 2004, 2005 sort of period here, sort of deforestation began decreasing quite rapidly, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the presentation. And we don't see this complete collapse of the cattle sector as some theorize that may happen. And in fact, the opposite occurred. And so you can see this continuous increasing here. So this doesn't at all indicate that we've achieved some sort of perfect solution, and there's obviously still quite a bit of work to be done. But to really make sure that we have lasting impacts at scale. But I think that this is a really good indication that things are headed in the right direction. So just to conclude, and hopefully I'm on time here, sustainable intensification really has the potential to improve productivity and profitability for ranchers. But I think it's really important, and sort of the emphasis of this presentation was to try to ensure that these are coupled efforts, so that efforts to encourage moderate or sustainable intensification are really coupled with the implementation of private sector, public sector initiatives towards zero deforestation. And this will really help generate additional synergies and benefits. So I know it was quick, it's brief, I kind of blitzed through a lot of things, and this presentation was in no way sort of a complete comprehensive overview of sustainable intensification or the Brazilian cattle sector by any means, but I hope it just provided a brief overview of the importance of this coupled approach and help spark some interesting questions from you all that we can have a really rich and meaningful discussion after the presentations. So thank you so much.
Security, water, and energy nexus.
Namaskar, salute to all. Chairperson Dr. Drew Black, distinguished speakers, and all distinguished people who are in the audience. I'm talking from perspective of a developing country with special focus from India. National Council is working with NGOs in India, and we are working in about 5,000 villages with more than 500,000 farmers. and we are a think tank organization. Our all NGOs are working at field level with farmer implementing rural development and agriculture projects. Now, in context of climate change, water, energy, and food are inextricably linked. Water is input for producing agriculture goods in field and along entire food supply chain. Energy is required to produce and distribute water, and food to pump water from groundwater or surface water sources to power tractors, irrigation machinery in process, and transport agriculture goods. They are also key to provide sustainable development, livelihood, and that matter, poverty reduction. The demand for fresh water, energy, and food will increase significantly in next decades. And this is due to increased urbanization, growing middle income families, increased manufacturing activities, transportation, so on and so forth. As per FAO estimate, this is 60% more food will be needed, and global energy consumption will increase by 50% by 2035, and water withdrawal will increase by 10% by 2050. As demand grows, there is this furious competition between different stakeholders, particularly agriculture, the farmers and urbanites, and within village level for drinking purpose of families, livestock and farming. As a concerned citizen, we are aware food, energy and water challenges are accepted, but they are addressed in a segmented manner. The district level or ground level, fragmented sectoral responsibilities and lack of coordination inconsistencies exist. And if water, energy and food security are simultaneously to be assured, decision makers need to understand. We need to involve public leadership to understand that sectoral management through enhanced dialogue, collaboration and coordination is needed. Now I'll talk about Indian situation very briefly. India is doing extremely well. The rate of growth of GDP is between 7 to 8%. Poverty in rural area has declined from 80% to 20% in last 60 years. Country used to import food from different parts of the world, United States and other countries initially, but now we are exporting. The agriculture growth has been steady at 2% and it is stable. Rural livelihood has improved. There are still huge numbers who are below poverty line. Farmers like to live farming as it is not profitable. And although country has achieved food security, the government has assured food security through statutory provisions, and employments are now provided when there is a drought or calamity, when farmers do not have their own income. So this is statutorily provided. Now coming back to the food security, due to rapid increase in non-agriculture activities like urbanization, industrialization, agriculture is under pressure, and therefore area under agriculture is getting reduced across the world. And same applies to water scarcity. Enhanced urbanization and industrial activity has done this. Even water meant for irrigation is used for urban township. And there is already deficiency in rural areas of energy. And with increased cost, this is likely to create more problem. And 24-hour electrical supply is not available, so local production is not taking place. The climate change has increased water energy related challenges, and with monsoon becoming irregular and dry spells and incidents of heavy rainfall, this has a huge impact on food productivity and security. Now, we are addressing now examples of inefficiencies. People are talking about going ahead, but if we identify inefficiencies, we can solve about 25 to 40% of situation. Now, majority of farm irrigation in developing countries flood. Now, that is wastage of water. Public irrigation system, canal are open, so it results into evaporation. We do not have standardized actual need per crop of water intake, or for that matter, per trees. And the entire canal irrigation is almost free. Water is not charged. And these are the reasons where there is inefficient use of water. And even areas where we have scarcity of water, there are now days where heavy water rainfall takes place and flooding takes place. Now, flooding also takes place due to silting of check dams, silting in river valley, silting in riverbed, growth of bushes in canal, incorrect data about absorbing capacity of river. So flooding is, when on one hand we have water shortage, man-made flooding is taking place. And in this context, we are also looking at wastage of food at two levels. One at farmers level. Farmer, when they are doing post-harvest activity, there is 5 to 25% of losses. This is while harvesting, cleaning, packaging, transporting due to heat wave and due to unseasonal frost. And consumers, which includes me and all of us, we take more food than we need in our plate. And that is a huge wastage. In Gujarat, we have introduced integrated water conservation model. I will just briefly deal with what we did in Gujarat. We constructed about 100,000 check dams. So every drop of water which comes is now protected or preserved, interlinked the rivers. We have a huge dam called Sardar Sarovar Dam, which is now linked with 11,000 villages which are drought stricken. Almost once in a 3 year, they are linked with piped water, drinking water supply. We have adopted a participatory approach. All this work is done by farmers themselves, or rural community. Government gives contribution and rural community contributes. We have introduced micro irrigation, drip irrigation in a very big way. In field of energy, we are now trying to separate out electrical grid for farming and for domestic purpose. But most important is a recent example of using solar pumps. Solar pumps are used in a farm, but that is not required for all the time. So therefore, solar energy is linked with the electrical supply grid. So whenever farmer is not pumping, the energy which is created, he gets money. Now this model is tested. Now it is working. There is a farmers cooperative and we are going to multiply it. So farmer has an income even if his crop fails, because energy provides his income. So way forward, we are looking at this, that we have to add value to the water. We have to introduce compulsory water cycling in urban areas and urban township, and wherever it is not possible, recharging. How to make micro irrigation, drip irrigation a way of life for farmers. Can we introduce pipe water supply? It is very expensive in developing countries, but how we can meet this from this forum, the UNFCCC Green Fund, to introduce that so evaporation losses are introduced, safe drinking water, and use of solar energy. But most important is use of biodiversity, because salinity ingress is taking place, and developing a village level water, energy, and farm plan. With this, I end my talk. I think time is also over. Thank you very much, Dr. Drew, for giving this opportunity and interacting on this important subject. Thank you very much. Pranam, salute again.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn to our last panelist for a presentation, Dr. Srivastava, with a discussion around weather forecasting for climate resilient agriculture.
I'm Dr. Rohit Srivastava from Indian Center for Climate and Societal Impact Research. Today I'm going to discuss about how weather forecasting is useful for sustainable agriculture. So we are developing one model also. So we know that weather and climate, what is the difference between weather and climate? Weather is what we measuring today. So that is weather. Climate represents the average condition. So last 3 decade condition, average condition of temperature, rainfall, that represents the climate over a location. So change now in changing climate is also affecting our weather. So now we know that in this changing climate scenario, extreme events are increasing, and weather forecasts are very important to handle such type of irregular rainfall event and how to plan. So we'll discuss about this. So we know that climate change cause and impact. So we know natural causes are forest fire, volcanic eruption. There are different causes are there. Then man-made causes are industrial and vehicular exhaust, crop residue burning. So I would like to inform you that our area crop residue burning is completely stopped. Now a farmer is this residue they are using for composting purpose, and organic carbon is enriching in the soil of our working area. So land use and land cover change, we know that now forest and deforestation and demand of development is changing land use and land cover. So the impact is global warming. We know that temperature is rising, glacier melting, sea level rise, then increasing extreme event, flood and droughts, which mainly affect the agriculture, and decline due to this declining agriculture productivity. So how climate change and agriculture is related? So you see that this due to this climate change, soil water is degrading. So evaporation is more because temperature is increasing. Crop pattern will change. Some region which is receiving rain now is receiving experiencing drought. So crop pattern will change according to the climate change. And agriculture input. So you require more fertilizer to grow more crop in changing climate. And then extreme events are increasing. So disaster catastrophes are increasing, and which influence the productivity and declining the farmers' income. So farmers are shifting their, they are leaving agriculture, and which affect the whole global food security. So this climate resilient agriculture, what is this concept? In this concept, the water, soil and water quality status will be analyzed in for each season. Then weather forecasting and agro advisory will be prepared and provided to farmers so that they can plan their activity. And whenever there is an extreme event or huge rainfall is going to occur, then weather alert, weather warning alert will be provided so that they can prepare their activity according to that. Then cattle health, if there is a increase in temperature in going to occur, then cattle health, how to procure that. Then satellite monitoring of crops, if we can have satellite monitoring of crop, we can detect that what type of crop is going to what type of diseases, and we can plan procure that. And then crop insurance, based on weather forecast and satellite monitoring, we can crop insurance can be done. And then information dissemination, so we are providing information via email, via SMS, via WhatsApp. So all the methods we are using to disseminate this information. And we also participating this farmer management and training program, farmer management training program, so that farmer can understand that how these weather forecast can be useful in their activities. So VRTI and NCCSD is organizing this type of trainings, and we are participating in that. So this was this year's Southwest June to September monsoon rainfall. This is provided by agency SkyMet. So we are providing this to farmers. So you can see this is in April 2016 we forecasted that how it's going to happen June to September rain. So we mainly receive rainfall in June to September month. That is Southwest monsoon in over South Asian region, Indian region. So you can see that initially it was less rain. Yellow and red represents lower rain when compared to the normal. Blue and light white color is the normal and high above normal rain. So you can see that initially rain was less, then it picks up, and in the later month it was higher. It was highest. So this type of pattern we've seen. So it is whole season rainfall. So you can see this region, whole region is green. Green means it is within plus minus 20%. This data is from IMD, India Meteorological Department. So you can see that whole India receives 6% less rain this year, and Kutch Saurashtra region receives 17% less rain, and Gujarat and Maharashtra receive 26 to 40%. So we are working in Gujarat region. So here this year rain was less over some region. Some region it is high also. Like Rajasthan region is high rain, blue color, more than 20% rain. So last 2 years, 2014 and 15, there was less rain, and this year it's a normal rain. So we already forecasted 2 months before to the farmer. So the effect of this less rain is not caused much because they are well prepared. They are prepared for their they were prepared for their activities, and they know that we are going to receive less rain. So they have taken crops which require less water. So in this way, they reduce the losses and convert their losses to the production, increase in production. So let's explain me why this weather forecast fails. So there are two types of processes. One is called deterministic process. So for example, we all have bank account. So what amount we have submitted, what is the interest rate we know. So we can exactly predict how much amount we have after 2 months, 3 months or 1 year. But there one game is dice game, where we know that dice will be rolled over, then the probability of coming a particular number, for example 5 or 6, is only 17%. So we cannot predict that. So weather forecasting is also a predictable process. You cannot 100% say that this is going to happen. We can only give the prediction probability. So ICSR is weekly releasing our organization weather forecast on each Tuesday. And we found that our forecast is 75 to 80% matches with the observation for rainfall, and more than 80% matches for other weather parameters. And this bulletin was found to be very useful for planning different activities according to weather condition. And under heavy rain condition, people will be prepared, and for catastrophe due to this heavy rain is reduced. So this is some of our achievement. This is automatic weather station. So we are providing continuous weather data to farmers. So each day at early morning they get the weather condition for last 24 hours, so they can plan their activity according to the current weather. So we are planning that we should put this is the map of Gujarat, and we want to plant that 5 weather station and build a network and provide the information with the forecasting to farmer. And in addition, we want to provide agromet advisory, so that according to prevailing weather condition, what farmers should do. For example, temperature and humidity combination, based on that we can predict what insect attack is going to occur. So based on that, how they can well prepare for under prevailing weather condition. So this type of agro advisory will be generated and disseminated. So are we planning that with this we can improve our agriculture, and sustainable agriculture can be done. Thank you organization for providing me opportunity to speak with you. Thank you all.
Good.
If you have any question, please. You know.
You come later. Sit, you take a seat. Yeah. Good. It was very good.
Okay, well, thank you so much, especially for being so on time. I didn't think that we were going to pull that off, but you guys did an excellent job of time management. And because of that, we've got a full 25 minutes for question and answer. So what we'd like to do maybe is we'll take 2 or 3 questions at a time from the audience, and then we'll give the panel a chance to respond to that, whether that's directed towards one person specifically, or if it's more of a general question to the entire panel. So I'd like to open it up at this point. So I've got the first one back here. Is there a second or third one we can add to that? We'll start with you, sir.
Thank you. Ralph Sims is my name, and I come from New Zealand, and we're an agricultural country. We've got 4.5 million people and about 10 million cattle and about 40 million sheep, and about half our export revenue comes from agriculture. So this is a very interesting topic for us. Reason I'm mentioning that is because we are totally subsidy-free in terms of agricultural production, and we have 85% renewable electricity for our national grid, again without any subsidies whatsoever for the wind or the solar or the bioenergy or the biogas or whatever. So my question is, mainly to the farming members of the panel, is how dependent do you think we would be on subsidies for renewable energy in order to get greater dissemination? And if I may add a comment, I did lead a project for the FAO, the UN Food Agricultural Organization. We launched it at COP19. It's called Energy Smart Food for People and Climate, and covers not just agricultural production, but the whole food supply chain. And we figured out there 32% of our end use energy goes to produce our food. That relates to 22% of total global greenhouse gas emissions. And as Don mentioned, we fail to consume 1/3 of the food we produce. But that particular project looked at energy efficiency on the farm and right the way through the food supply chain, and increasing the renewable energy inputs as well. So it's an Energy Smart Food. Google that at FAO and you'll get a copy of it, but it's relevant. But my question is on the subsidies. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions from the audience at this point? I see one again in the middle in the back, and then we'll get the panel to respond to both of those, please.
Okay, thank you. My name is Tendai Maro from Zimbabwe. Mine is actually in addition to what this gentleman has said. Considering that the consumption per capita of beef is high in Brazil, and according to literature, it is said that to produce a cow actually results in a lot of emissions. And are you considering sustainable consumption as a way of reducing emissions? And if yes, how is it received in your country by the generality of the Brazilians? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So maybe I'll turn to some of the farmers here to answer the first questions, perhaps.
What question on subsidy?
The-
So are we alive yet?
Yep.
Hello? The short answer is it depends. And it depends on where you're starting from. And I would offer that in the experiences that I've seen and where I actually live, it's two different worlds. If you don't have any system at all right now of electrification out there in your landscape, your first stab should be at using renewables because it's immediately available to you on your landscape and build the system to where it needs to go. When you already have an established older electricity system or natural gas system, it now becomes the issue of can you tap into that structure with the new opportunities. And if you try to do that, usually you're stepping on somebody else's toes who's well established, and they're very difficult to deal with unless you have government policy that helps move you there. And if you're trying to entice business into your particular region or province, then that's where folks like Germany started off with feed-in tariffs to enhance their activities, and the province of Ontario and Canada also modeled after that. So it becomes the reality of what are your constraints that you already have in your system? Because I need to add one more for the province of Ontario. And that's the reality that we are part of a North American grid. So once those electrons are on the system, they have to remain in balance for pretty well the whole system is around there. So that becomes now issues of import and export. And if you oversubscribe your system, you're going to have political hell to pay. And that's where some of the issue is at now. So the issue of should we have a subsidy or not? It's a very difficult question to answer depending on where your policy is at. When it comes to be as a farmer perspective, if I've got the opportunities to do it and it becomes an issue that it's cheaper for me to be producing my own power than taking it off the grid, the short answer is let's get at it.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Schlatt?
But before I answer, I would request a scholar from New Zealand to tell me what is average holding of a farmer in New Zealand.
It's large scale. The average holding is 500 cows.
No, average holding of a farmer. 5 hectares, 10 hectares, 100 hectares, 1,000 hectares.
In terms of land area,
yes.
For intensive, well, there's horticulture, small holding, 5 hectares. There's dairy farms, could be 100 hectares to 500 hectares. So much larger scale than what there is in India. So the report that I mentioned for FAO covered all scales, small farmers as well as commercial farms.
Yeah, thank you. So that is why I want to put this subsidy perspective. One is developed countries, where you have resources, the farmers have huge chunk of lands, good water and irrigation condition, you need to provide them knowledge. In case of developing countries, you have farmers and farmers who are below poverty line. Now, what do we mean by below poverty line? We mean by below poverty line, his expenditure is greater than his income. Now, if you do not assist him, he is not capable of taking his economic activity anywhere. Now, subsidy in developing countries is a direct transfer of resources from national exchequer tax collection to farmers, or for that matter, we have midday meal scheme. We provide food. hot lunch to the children in the school. That is free. We provide food at subsidized rate in the market to the below poverty line people. Reason is that if you do not do this, these people will never come out of poverty because they are indebted, because they do not have resources. Their average holding is half a hectare.
Yeah.
So therefore, you have to link the requirement of subsidy or direct transfer of resources in a developing country and a developed country. Within developing countries, between families below poverty line and families above poverty line. And as I mentioned, we had, when we became independent in 1947 and started plan process, 90% of people were below poverty line in rural areas. Today, this has come down to 20%. Now, this 20% is also a very huge number. So we have to tackle them very carefully so that they are nurtured, they are individually attended, then they can come out. If you do not do that, you have social turmoil. You have riots for water, you have riots for food, and that is happening in many parts of the world. And in many parts of the world, forced migration because of the crop failure and not taking care of below poverty line people, huge number of population is moving from one country to the another country. And both, that is creating a major problem to the country where they go. And they are in 100,000s. And we all know where this is happening. So please, let us take a view of subsidy based on local situation. What is the need? How much national resources should directly go to the poor people, and how they should be transferred in a transparent manner.
Okay, thank you. I think we've got a perspective from France next. Olivier?
Yes, sorry, I will be my answer in French and I will have a translation. Non, juste, je crois qu'il ne faut pas opposer production alimentaire, qui est la première production de tout producteur agricole, que tout agriculteur, qui doit être sa priorité, de la production énergétique. Déjà parce que l'agriculture a toujours produit de l'énergie, notamment avant l'ère fossile, et qu'il n'y a pas... L'agriculture produit de l'énergie, qu'elle soit alimentaire ou non alimentaire, ça reste de l'énergie. Ça, c'est la première chose. La deuxième chose, c'est que l'agriculture vit tous les enjeux en même temps. Elle est victime, elle est cause, elle est solution. Et dans cet esprit-là, elle doit répondre justement aux besoins alimentaires, mais aussi à cette transition énergétique, mais aussi au captage du carbone. Donc, il faut avoir une vision globale vision. Et notamment, on sait très bien, le 4 pour 1000, pas dans ce sens-là, on sait très bien que pour renforcer la matière organique, il faut produire de la biomasse. Et ensuite, le grand défi, c'est de capter la biomasse, qu'elle reste sur le sol. Et cette biomasse qui est au-dessus du sol peut servir à faire de l'énergie. C'est une vision, là, je vais...
Yes. So our message is that we think that for food production is a priority for farmers, and especially for French farmers, but it's complementary for the energy production. Agriculture has produced in this history energy for many, many years now, so it's not something new. And agriculture has to face for multiple challenges, and production of energy is one of the different of the challenge that we have to face also in order to substitute to fossil energy for non-fossil energy. So our understanding of the challenge is that everything is complementary, and food production and energy production are a synergy that we try to develop all together. And that's it. Yeah, also we try to, also we work on the 4 in 1000 initiative, which is the French initiative that our agriculture ministry presented to the previous COP21 last year. As for us, as for the French farmers, to improve the biomass in the soil enables enables our soil to be more efficient in the CO2 captation. So that's something we are really working on, and we try to develop in the years in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now for the second question regarding beef consumption, I think I might pick on Simon a little bit on that one. I'd like to address that a little bit, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, thanks. It's a really interesting question, actually. Maybe I should just start with full disclosure. I'm not Brazilian. I guess in light of recent events, it's somewhat embarrassing, but I'm from the U.S. And the National Wildlife Federation is for the most part a U.S. focused NGO. So there's a distinct role that we play, and we don't see it as our role to sort of dictate consumption terms or advance that agenda on other countries. And I'd also point out too that it's not just about producing countries and consuming countries. This is sort of a really you can't sort of disaggregate these value chains. It's not just beef either. Cattle products span a wide variety of products, everything from leather to tallow to biodiesel, collagen, so on and so forth. So it's really a fully integrated system. I think that in terms of from an emissions standpoint, from that particular region, which I presented on, the biggest, if you were to break down the full emissions profile of that, and I actually didn't include a slide on that, which perhaps thinking back I could have now, the biggest segment of that profile is land use change. And that's mainly around deforestation. So I think that there's a tremendous opportunity right now, and what our organization is focused on with many others in Brazil and around the world is looking at sort of how can we really adopt a pragmatic approach to this. There's a tremendous opportunity to reduce emissions. That's not just beneficial from a greenhouse gas standpoint, but obviously there's tremendous benefits there as well. As a wildlife organization, our main objective and goal is to ensure that we have healthy wildlife populations around the world, especially in the tropics, and ensure that there's healthy biodiversity as well. So for us, the biggest, the major focus and the aim is around forest loss and land use conversion for pasture. I'd also just mention that there's a tremendous opportunity in terms of reducing the emissions intensity of production through recovering degraded landscapes, degraded pastures more specifically, and increasing the productivity of already cleared lands. There's millions of hectares of already cleared land. There's really, if we're doing this in a coordinated way and sort of working collectively around this approach, I think that there's just a great opportunity to invest in our opened areas already. So improved grass mixtures and things like that, reducing the calving cycle, can reduce greenhouse gas emissions as well. So you look at the profile and you look at where should we be focusing our efforts. Obviously, as the National Wildlife Federation, we can't sort of do everything, and there's limited resources, and we can be realistic about it. So looking at that profile, that's where we sort of see as the priority focus for us. But there's lots of organizations focused on different aspects of that sort of emissions profile there.
Good. Okay, thank you. I'd like to turn for a couple more questions, please. I see there's one down here in the middle.
Thanks. I'm Keris Jones from the National Farmers Union of England and Wales, and here with the World Farmers Organization delegation. I have a couple of questions, if that's okay. The first is about on-farm renewable energy. I wondered if the panel had a comment on the range of benefits they believe that on-farm renewables can bring to farm businesses, not only to direct to the farm, perhaps enabling them to add value to products. And secondly is to Dr. Srivastava. I'm interested in what timescales for weather forecasts farmers in India are interested in. Do they want to know what's happening the next day or the next week or the next month? Thank you.
Thanks. Is there maybe one more question we can add to that from the audience? Okay, well, is there one right here? Yeah, and then we'll answer those collectively.
Thank you. So that's for Simon, and thanks for the presentation. It's very good.
Sorry, can you speak up just a bit more?
My name is Sinir. I'm from Florida, Brazil. And as Simon said, it's very, in my humble opinion, it's very well put what Brazil needs to do in order to get its livestock a little bit more sustainable from the point of view of climate change, at least. That we have a lot of land that can, in a wisely way, at least double our meat production without cutting down any other tree. And my question is like, in the northern part of Brazil, as we know, there's many areas that lack, besides technical assistance and other access to farm inputs, infrastructure. And my question is if any I'm sorry, for NWF is addressing the point of infrastructure, and what infrastructure can for itself streamline access to farm stuff that ultimately will reduce greenhouse gas emissions if used in a wisely way in northern in the Amazon biome, for example.
Okay, thank you very much. So why don't we start with the questions directed primarily to Indian farmers. What time scales are they looking to address? And if you could please speak into the microphone.
So presently we are providing 3 time scale. One is daily, 1 day prediction. So every morning you will receive that what is going to happen in today. Second one is the weekly prediction. So on each Tuesday you will get what the week is going to be happen. So what planning you should do for a week. Then the third level is the long range prediction, that 1 season ahead you will know that what is going to happen for next season, so that you can plan what type of seed you should purchase, whether you should use more water require crop or less water require based on that. And third one which we are planning and developing is the decadal prediction. In that 1 decade you will know that what should a type of crop pattern one village should have, because it's changing climate that require the decadal prediction also. So that we are developing, but 3 predictions we are providing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So how about the other question regarding the range of benefits that can be provided by on-farm renewable energy and the opportunities for value added? Would like to take a first crack at that one.
I would offer that the on-farm benefits are number one when it comes to some of the scale of operations that now exist. You cannot afford to have a moment where your livestock, for example, is not being properly heated or cooled, depending on what climate you're in. The issues of maintaining refrigeration on the produce that you've just collected or whatever else, again, you can't afford to lose a moment and lose that crop. So therefore, the issue of having what I would offer our backup generation is usually the term that's been used in the past. It's now evolving to the issue that with the evolution of technology, it can actually be cheaper for you to produce power on your own system, on your own grid, and now use the former public grid that you are attached to as backup. So the benefits along all these lines are the issues of attempting to reduce cost in other aspects of your business case because you've been able to invest in these things. If you're doing on-farm processing to prepare carrots or something, you're going to have leftover waste. Can those be moved into an anaerobic digester that then becomes another opportunity of power source, and you don't have dumping fees with regards to some of those wastes? And it's I think it's so dependent on what your business that you're operating is versus the resources you have available to you, and at the same time, how far away are you from the grid, or if you're out in a fresh area or whatever else. So I think the benefits are multiple, but the benefits also need to be weighed too. As I pointed out earlier, the cascade and where's the best use of your feedstock? Because I summarize it this way: agriculture does not have anything that's waste. All we have is underutilized, underpriced opportunity. We just got to figure out how to harness it.
Okay, thank you. Any other reflections from the panel on that point? Okay, well, Simon, I believe that last question was you once again be the best place person to answer that.
Field all the cattle questions. That's all right. No, I think it's a really good question. I would just pose just a bit of framing around this. And if we're talking about infrastructure as we would traditionally think of infrastructure as roads and plants and those types of sort of more of like hardened facilities, that's not something that NWF directly works on. But if we're thinking of infrastructure in more as the sort of like support networks, then absolutely, that's something that I think is critical for this. I mean, something that I mentioned in my presentation that I know I kind of blitzed through, it's very quick, but improving access to agricultural extension types of service. So technical services for ranchers. It's not enough to just sort of, flop a manual down and say, yeah, just go ahead and do this. I know it's 600 pages, but you can figure it out. What it needs to sort of, there needs to be sort of, dedicated resources to help guide those practices, to answer questions. So there's a continuous feedback. There's a two-way street between what's working, what's not working. And a lot of the, as you know, a lot of the NGOs that are working in that space are providing resources like that. The National Wildlife Federation doesn't have projects on the ground per se, but because we work at more of a supply chain level. So what we're trying to do is provide enhanced resources and coordination and support for a variety of different areas. And one, just to your point, is around, because I think it's really important and gets to sort of how do we actually execute something like this, is streamlining access to capital and developing really clear pragmatic value propositions for why does it make sense to put large capital investments up front to improve grass mixtures, to do better herd and pasture management. Why does it make sense to install water management systems and pumps so that we avoid sort of, erosion in riparian areas? Why does fencing and paddocks make sense? Those all have a significant upfront capital costs associated with them. And one of the things that we're trying to work on with a variety of other project partners and several different projects is de-risking those flows of capital. Oftentimes, just from conversations, financial institutions have some reservations giving a loan for those types of things, because it's hard to go back and audit that. It's not like buying a tractor where I can go back and say, yes, you bought a tractor, there's one tractor. It's hard to sort of really have quantifiable metrics around, grass mixture improvements and things like that. So how do we sort of create an environment that de-risks that and sort of mainstreams capital flow so that we can actually facilitate better ag extension services to producers that want to adopt practices like that? And I think part of the way we do this is there is a real disconnect. And I think one of the other panelists hit on this in one of the earlier presentations, is there's a disconnect between some producers in the value chain. And I don't necessarily think that that's a really good situation to have. I think that, of course, there's nuances to this, and it's not just a blanket statement that applies to everything. But I think there's a lot of value in sort of having, bridging that gap there and better integrating the upstream and downstream actors so that everyone can be working towards the shared goal. And I think that's definitely something that we're trying to advance.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll now turn to Dr. Srivastava to provide some closing comments, sum up some of the discussion that we've had here today, and a couple closing remarks, please.
Thank you, Dr. Drew. At the outset, let me thank our audience, speakers, panelists, and the members of the audience, those who have raised very pertinent questions related to the topic. Yesterday, when I had a very brief interaction with Drew, he mentioned that my job would be to pick up one or two very, very important issues from each speaker and put them proper perspective. I do not know whether I will be able to do justice or not, but what I did while the presentations were on, I was just trying to capture a couple of points which are very important in my opinion. And maybe I'll take speaker by speaker and list out not more than 3 to 4 important points which had emerged. And maybe towards end, if Mr. Drew permits, I will have my own points, not more than 3 to 4. Let me begin with Don. His entire presentation was on how to manage the natural balance of soil health. Number one. Number two, how to maintain the soil health sustainability, and what are those very important green measures or organic measures. I said like your interventions, because it was all centered around management of natural resources for sustainable production. In the process, sir, you have given a very good definition of a farmer. I liked it, sir. Having worked with the Minister of Agriculture for a very long time in India and subsequently with Planning Commission, and now associated with Dr. Shelat, said, Mr. Don's definition of farmer is very good. In the sense, what he says that the farmer is a micro situation level manager, who manages the carbon economy, the nitrogen economy, the water, energy, the crop, and maintains a very fine balance under the resource availability situation and availability. The third thing which appealed to me was how to manage the biomass utilization coupled with green solutions and coupled with adaptation of climate change. These were the highlights of Mr. Don's presentation. Let me come to Mr. Oliver. He had upfront had pointed out what should be the optimal utilization of input use for agriculture production and productivity. And he mentioned that vulnerability of agriculture is far more important, and therefore the management of energy and especially bioenergy is a frontline area, a front area. And sir, you had given a couple of examples of biofuel. You understand this? But
Sorry.
I just you had asked me to wind up in 1 minute. I will take 2 minutes more. If
Quickly,
audience
please.
agrees, I will go ahead. Otherwise, we can wind up also. I'll take just 1 minute of Mr. Drew and then 2 minutes of mine. So within 3 minutes, I will wind up. Then came Mr. Simon, and the best part of Simon's presentation was the sustainable intensification, and he mentioned that there are tremendous advantages of going to sustainable intensification technology. He specifically mentioned that reduction of greenhouse gases, improvement of livelihood, and what I like, because being student of agriculture extension, Simon, your interventions on extension were far more appealing to me, than perhaps audience. You mentioned that demand for extension services will be increased if we go for sustainable intensification. And also you mentioned that there has to be coordination between the R&D sources. You also mentioned about good agriculture practices and its application at the grassroots level. Dr. Shelat is championing the cause of climate change extension in India. I've been associated with Dr. Shelat for the last couple of years. And when I was working with the Planning Commission, I have seen his work very closely. 3 points from Dr. Shelat's presentation. Number one is, the perfect balance between, food, water, and energy, requirements. Then, sir, also you mentioned about, micro irrigation plants. And third thing, sir, which I have been following you and you have been, guiding us on how to bring down climate change interventions from national, international levels to the county level or district level, or how to make it happen on the ground at the village level or at the cluster level. I mean, these were the 3-4 important points which Dr. Shalat had mentioned. Mr. Srivastawa's presentation was very, very clear. A young man trying to establish a relationship between the weather advisory and application of technologies by the farmers. I come to my 3 points. Point number 1 is I have been following these recommendations on climate change, national, international forum, right from Warsaw, then Paris, and now there's a lot of talk going on at the national, international level. But when it comes to the countries and the districts and counties, a lot of things will have to be done. And I would draw attention of World Farmers Forum, to organize, link, and motivate not only the states and governments, but the non-government organizations and civil society organizations to draw from their strength in implementing these programs. Then
Okay.
point for Mr. Drew would be,
Last point.
can we take, last 1 minute, can we take 1 point from each one of these speakers and set that as an agenda for the next a year or so, and then review that after about 6 months? What were the points? What are the important points given by the speakers, and how to ground them, implement them through a network?
Okay, and I'm afraid we're going to have to pick up that point. I'd like to encourage us to have some more conversation about this perhaps out in the hallway, but there is another side event coming in, and we've been getting the look for
Thank you very
5
much.
minutes
Thanks a lot.
now. So
Thanks a lot.
thank you again very much to our panel and for our participants in the questions. Sorry.